I've always had a habit of diving headfirst into hobbies, only to abandon them once the novelty wore off. It was like a cycle. One year it was hiking, the next it was woodworking. In the summer of 2022, fishing had become my latest obsession. There was something hypnotic about the quiet rhythm of casting a line into the water, waiting for the telltale tug that signaled a catch. My friend Kevin was a seasoned fisherman, and it was largely because of him that I found myself so engrossed in it. We'd spent countless weekends at my family's shore house, an old place on the water that had been in our family for generations. It was small, a bit run down, but it was perfect for our trips. By October, the summer heat had given way to the cooler, crisper air of fall, and Kevin suggested one last trip to the shore house before the season ended. Joining us was Eerie, another close friend who'd caught the fishing bug from Kevin, just like I had. The plan was simple: spend the weekend fishing, drinking, and unwinding before winter rolled in. It was supposed to be a normal, relaxing trip. But what happened that weekend would haunt me forever. We arrived at the shore house late Friday afternoon, the sun already dipping below the horizon. The boat was out of commission for repairs, so we resigned ourselves to fishing off the beach and the nearby piers. Kevin had packed his gear meticulously, as always, bringing everything we could possibly need. The day passed without much excitement. Only Kevin managed to catch a small bass. As the night approached, our spirits were low. Kevin, ever the optimist, suggested we try a different spot. "There's a beach about 15 minutes from here," Kevin said, his eyes bright with excitement. "No one ever goes there this time of year, and it's perfect for night fishing." Arian and I agreed, more for Kevin's sake, anything else. We piled into my car, and Kevin directed us down a narrow, winding road flanked by dense woods. The road seemed to stretch on forever, the trees on either side closing in, creating an eerie tunnel that blocked out the sky. Finally, the road opened into a small gravel lot. "Here we are," Kevin announced, stepping out of the car. The lot was deserted, not a single other car in sight. The air was cold, and the only sound was the distant crash of waves against the shore. We grabbed our gear and followed Kevin down a narrow path that led through the trees. The path was uneven, and with every step, the sense of isolation deepened. After about 5 minutes, the trees gave way to a vast, empty beach. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the sand and the dark, churning water. We set up our camp. A couple of beach chairs, a cooler filled with beer and snacks, and Kevin's fishing rods, which he hammered into the sand. The beach was completely deserted, and the only sound was the rhythmic lapping of the waves against the shore. We cast our lines into the water and settled in, the darkness and solitude of the beach giving the night a surreal quality. The hours passed in relative silence, broken only by the occasional burst of conversation or the clink of a beer bottle. Each of us managed to catch a few fish, nothing big, but enough to keep our spirits up. The night was peaceful, almost too peaceful, and I remember feeling a strange sense of unease creeping in. It was Arian who first noticed something was off. We were in the middle of a conversation when he suddenly stopped, lowering the music and tilting his head to the side as if listening for something. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Kevin and I exchanged puzzled glances. "Hear what?" I asked. Arian shook his head, still listening. "I thought I heard someone shout." We all fell silent, straining to hear whatever it was Arian thought he'd heard, but there was nothing, just the sound of the waves and the distant cry of a seagull. Arian eventually shrugged it off, but the mood had shifted. We were more alert now, peaceful night suddenly feeling more oppressive, as if the darkness was pressing in on us. A little while later, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow, moving along the beach. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned to get a better look. There, in the distance, was a figure walking towards us. The others noticed it too, and we all fell silent, our eyes locked on the approaching figure. As it got closer, the details became clearer. It was a man, middle-aged, wearing a dark blue jacket and a hat with the hood pulled up over his head. "Who the hell is that?" Arian muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Kevin didn't say anything, but I could see the tension in his posture. The man kept walking, his pace slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. When he was finally close enough, he stopped, standing just a few feet away from us. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, his eyes hidden in the shadow of his hood, staring at us. "What are you boys up to?" he finally asked, his voice low and gravelly. I opened my mouth to respond, but Kevin beat me to it. "We're fishing," he said, his tone cautious. The man grunted, a sound that was neither friendly nor hostile. He nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over us, the fishing rods, and the water beyond. There was something about the way he looked at us that set my nerves on edge. He didn't seem threatening, exactly, but there was a coldness to him, a detachment that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. For what felt like an eternity, the man just stood there, staring at us. None of us knew what to do. Kevin shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me and Arian as if waiting for one of us to say something. But before anyone could, the bell on one of the rods jingled, breaking the tense silence. "I think we've got a bite," I said, more to break the awkwardness than anything else. I walked over to the rod and started reeling in the line. When I turned back around, the man was gone. He had simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness, as silently as he had appeared. We watched him go, none of us saying a word. When he was finally out of sight, we all let out a collective breath we hadn't realized we'd been holding. "That was weird as hell," Arian said, his voice shaky. Kevin nodded, his expression troubled. "Yeah, I didn't like that guy." We all agreed to keep the music off for the rest of the night, just in case. The strange encounter had killed the relaxed vibe, and we were all on edge, jumping at every little sound. But as the hours passed and nothing else happened, we started to relax again. We cracked open a few more beers, the conversation slowly returning to normal. But the sense of unease lingered, a dark cloud that refused to lift. Must have been around 3 a.m. when I heard it. Faint sound in the distance, growing louder and more insistent. At first, I couldn't place it, but as the noise grew clearer, my heart sank. It was a car alarm, blaring through the stillness of the night. "Oh shit," I whispered, suddenly wide awake. Kevin and Arian looked at me, confusion written on their faces. "What is it?" Arian asked. "That's my car," I said, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. Someone's messing with my car. Without another word, we all jumped to our feet and started running back down the path, the sound of the alarm growing louder with every step. The trees seemed to close in around us, the darkness pressing in, making it feel like we were running through a nightmare. My heart was pounding in my chest, a sick feeling of dread settling in the pit of my stomach. When we finally burst out of the trees and into the gravel lot, I stopped dead in my tracks. My car was a mess. The tires had been slashed, the driver's side window shattered. Glass littered the ground, and the car alarm was screaming into the night, shrill, piercing sound that made my skin crawl. "What the fuck?" Kevin shouted, running up to the car. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm and professional, a stark contrast to the panic I felt. I explained the situation as best I could, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "Did you see who did it?" she asked. "There was a guy," I said, my voice shaking. "He was acting weird earlier. He just showed up on the beach and then left. We didn't see where he went." "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Police are on their way. Stay where you are and don't approach the vehicle." As if on cue, we heard a rustling in the woods behind us. We all froze, our eyes wide with fear. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Someone or something was moving through the trees, getting closer. "We need to get out of here," Arian whispered, voice barely audible. Without thinking, we turned and bolted down the road, running as fast as we could. My heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We didn't stop until we were a good 200 yards away, hidden in the shadows of the trees. I could still hear the car alarm in the distance, a constant reminder of the danger we were in. "Can't just stay here," Kevin said, his voice trembling. "What if he finds us?" It didn't have an answer. We were trapped, caught between the darkness of the woods and the vulnerability of the open road. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of fear through me. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, praying that the police would arrive soon. The wait felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was only about 10 minutes before we saw the flashing lights of the police car speeding up the road. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As we stepped out of the trees and flagged down the officers, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. 3 officers stepped out of the cars, their faces grim as they surveyed the damage. I told them everything, about the man on the beach, the slashed tires, the broken window. They listened carefully, their expressions growing more serious with every word. "You did the right thing by running and hiding," one of the officers said. "It's likely this man intended to do you harm." Those words sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't realized just how close we'd come to something truly terrible. As the officers searched the area, one of them found a large knife lying on the ground near the car. He picked it up carefully, holding it by the blade to avoid smudging any fingerprint. "This could be what he used to slash the tires," the officer said, his voice tense. "We'll take it in for analysis." I nodded numbly, still in shock. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The officers helped us pack up our equipment, and one of them gave us a ride back to the shore house. None of us said much on the drive back, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on us. When we finally got back to the house, we sat in silence, each of us lost in our own thought. The reality of what had almost happened was starting to sink in, and it was terrifying. We had come so close to something truly horrific, and the thought of what could have happened if we hadn't run was too much to bear. The morning sun brought little comfort. Arian managed to arrange a ride back home for us, and we left the shore house as soon as possible. Didn't stand to be there any longer. Memories of the night before still too fresh, too raw. When I picked up my car from the shop a few days later, it felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. Part that had loved fishing, that had found peace and joy in it, is gone, replaced by a lingering sense of fear and paranoia. The police never caught the man. I never got a call back from them, and as far as I know, he's still out there somewhere. I tried to put it all behind me, move on, but it's not that easy. Every time I close my eyes, I see that dark figure on the beach, hear the sound of my car alarm echoing through the night. I can't help but wonder what would have happened if we hadn't run. If we had stayed there on that beach, oblivious to the danger creeping up on us. I've given up fishing. I haven't touched a rod or gone near the water since that night. The thought of it makes my skin crawl, brings back memories I'd rather forget. But I can't forget. That night is burned into my memory, a constant reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, how close we came to something truly terrifying. And as the nights grow longer and the shadows stretch out, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over. That somewhere out there in the darkness, he's still watching, still waiting.